everyone. It's great to be here. I grew up in Nigeria for almost the whole of my life, and losing my sight to meningitis at the age of 11 meant that I had to learn to live differently, be it from navigating an inaccessible environment as it related to infrastructure, the negative attitude or perceptions of individual, particularly regarding persons with disabilities, to issues around discrimination, and even acquiring an education was quite a difficult one for me. From all through my secondary school, which is high school, up to the university, where I obtained my first degree, I used Braille, which are the 6 rays of dots that blind people use to read. I used that to take notes in class. And I also used a manual typewriter to write my examinations, which were verbally dictated to me. You can just imagine. But I surmounted all of those challenges. And for me, that was the world that I knew, until I came to the UK in 2019 to undergo a Master's in Development at the Institute of Development Studies in Sussex, where for the first time I had a different worldview to what inclusion was as it related to education. I had a practical experience of accessibility because of the different reasonable accommodations that were made, provided for me. And that made learning so seamless. That made my study experience really amazing. That is not to say that my journey in the UK was, all a rosy ride. Of course, there are gaps in this society as well. And that brings me to the fact that if we are to have a conversation around building back better but different, we need to first understand what exists in the present system, what are the gaps, what are the cracks in the fabric of society. And by having an understanding of those issues, then it can provide a roadmap for us to begin to profile solutions to build back better. As such, I would like to talk about inclusion and access, drawing from my experience in my studies, in my work as a director of a non-profit in Nigeria, and also from my interaction in my environment as a person with a disability. I wish to raise awareness about inclusion and access. So a couple of months ago, I was walking through the University of Sussex with my friend, and she drew my attention to the footprints that they had put on the floor as an indication for social distancing, which are part of the measures for protecting students. And I thought to myself, of how relevant was this strategy to me as a blind person. And let's even look beyond me. There are other people who may not be totally blind like me, but may have other side defects like short-sightedness or long-sightedness, or whatever other eye defects that they may have, that may not even be able to see those markings on the floor. Yes, a great idea and great strategy. But how about if whoever brought that idea thought about putting tactile markings on those prints, and they sensitize me as a blind person that if you're walking on the road and you place your feet on these tactile markings, they are the markings that have been put as indications for social distancing, just like you have for road crossings across the UK. I think if whoever made the suggestion for that strategy was thinking inclusion and thinking access, he would have made this suggestion with tactile markings. Similarly, in the month of August this year, I was invited to attend a conference, and it was supposed to be hosted on a virtual island. And this island had a beach, it had a football pitch, it had so many recreational facilities fitted into it, and a huge different conference halls within the island. It was a really beautiful island. I'm sure you might be wondering, oh, she's blind. How did she know that it was a beautiful island? My friends gave me a vivid description about it. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to participate in that event. It was a virtual event. I wasn't able to participate. Why? The island that had been built had no accessibility feature factored into it whatsoever. And that meant that my screen readers, be it the job access with speech that I use on my computer, which is JAWS, or the voiceover, which is on my iOS device, could not access the platform. And that, again, to me, is one of the gaps that we have, even as we're thinking about strategies for moving to virtual spaces and digital spaces. In addition, I reflected on the strategy that we have taken towards addressing the issue that regarding education. Because of the pandemic, of course, we've had cuts in physical learning spaces, and we've had to move online. But have we paused to think about how many people, how many children, and how many persons across the world have access to remote learning tools like computers, internet, and even WhatsApp? I think is the case for children and persons with disabilities who may require additional assistive technology or learning aid to be able to effectively navigate those online platforms. So my question is, are we widening the gap of inequality that exists presently in the solutions that we're developing or designing in the post-COVID-19, or for building back better? Are we further deepening the exclusion that persons with disabilities face? And I think the answer to that question is that people are not thinking inclusion, and people are not thinking access. And by inclusion here, I mean ensuring that everybody, regardless of disability, is considered in policies, in programs, in products and activities. And access is simply the gateway. So I would say inclusion and access are two sides of the same coin. So this is relevant, particularly in development, because we are mostly saddled with responsibility of designing and implementing programs. We conduct research, and we're able to make policy recommendations to governments and to different organizational structures. So why is it necessary for us to raise awareness? I think awareness on inclusion is important. It is important for us to raise awareness and bring attention to issues of inclusion and access, because it serves as the key to making a difference. Robert Chambers, who is a popular faculty at IDS, I must say one of my favorite, by the way, he said in his book, Whose Reality Counts, that for us as development professionals, we think the way that we think, we act the way that we act, because we do not question things. And it's only in questioning things do we change. So it is important for us to begin to scrutinize these strategies and policies that we're putting out there, be it as it relates to remote working, be it as it relates to online learning in terms of education, as I've mentioned, and in technological innovations. And this also applies to us as individuals, because in the last, owing to the pandemic, we have had an exponential increase in YouTubers, vloggers, and we have individuals developing and generating content for public consumption. I think it's important for us to pause and ask ourselves, who would benefit from what I have designed, from what I have developed? Who is able to consume? How many people in society will be able to consume the content that I have generated? And it's only in thinking this way that I feel that we will be thinking inclusion and thinking access, and we'll be able to question our actions, like Robert Chambers said in his book. From my experience, I would like to give 3 suggestions on how we can begin to think inclusion and access, and how this can help to contribute to inclusive development. And for me, the first will be consultation and active involvement of persons with disabilities, be it in policy processes, in program design and implementation. Because as the mantra goes, nothing about us without us. And that is it. The voice of persons with disabilities need to be heard from the design stage of any project, because I always say after a project or program or policy has been designed, it is difficult to begin to bring adaptive measures, because that's like medicine after death. So bringing their voices in from the design stage, it helps to ensure that the inclusive processes are put in place and the accessibility that is required is also adequately addressed. My second suggestion would also to be that to encourage a broad-based production, bearing in mind that persons with disabilities are different. Persons with disabilities are different and their peculiar needs vary from person to person. Lastly, I think it is important for us to have collaboration across different disciplines and cultural backgrounds. This is to encourage knowledge sharing and learning exchange, so that countries and organizations and individuals who are getting it right in terms of inclusion and access can share with others, can share good practices with others, and together we can build a world that is better for all. As Jesse Jackson said, Jesse Jackson, a writer, as he says, when everyone is included, everyone wins. So I say, if we are to build a world that is better for all, then we need to think inclusion and we need to think access. Thank you.